Today we are talking about data centers with Amy Drake.
Another issue of the Irving Herald is off the press. First copies of Irving's newspaper were distributed the very day lots were auctioned off to start the city of Irving.
Welcome, Amy Drake. Please introduce yourself. Tell us about your political career, which is not without its excitement.
So I am Amy Drake, and I live in the South Bend, Indiana area, home to Notre Dame. I got elected right after COVID in 2022, but it was COVID that helped me get elected. I'm a Republican. I won in a Democrat district by 35 votes. It was my grassroots people through COVID that helped me get elected. And right now in St. Joe County, the big issue is data centers. And we have had several data centers trying to come into our area, and they have been with mixed results, I would say, and whether they've been accepted or not accepted.
So there's been three of these in your time. What year were you first elected?
So I was elected in 2022. So then my first year on the council was 2023. And so 2 years ago, I think it was 2024, I think, we had our first data center come into St. Joe County. Do you want me to tell you about that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so it was Amazon, AWS. It is a really big data center project. So in Indiana, we've had a lot of data center projects that are $1 billion projects. This one was, I think, $11 billion. So it was one of their like more flagship data centers. And when they first came in, none of us knew what data centers are, which is kind of funny when you think about that. Only 2 years ago, nobody knew what data centers were. And I know that some regions of the country, like Virginia, probably knew what they were, but most people didn't know what they were. And so we had kind of an economic development region that had been very controversial, but it was finally accepted by the townspeople, this economic development area, but they were trying to find an anchor for it. And so finally, Amazon wanted to come in. I think the townspeople had just accepted that there was going to be an industrial company in there. And so, Amazon really didn't have a hard time coming in. They kind of taught us what data centers were. We listened to their pitch. Nobody really fought it. And they were our first data center. The only controversy I would say with the first data center is that we have a council of 9 people representing our county of 275,000. And 2 of us, including myself, did not vote for the abatement package for Amazon because we felt they were already building, they wanted to be here. So we didn't agree with the abatement, but they still got it because they won 7-2. So that was the first story.
Okay, and so they asked for that tax abatement when they were asking for approval for the data center.
Right, they had already gotten I can't remember if it was a zoning that we had given them or we had done an initial passage. I don't remember exactly what the vote was, and that was unanimously passed. And then it was the abatement that went 7-2. And personally, I was super pressured by I'm a Republican, so I was super pressured by a lot of our pro-development business type professionals to not turn this project down, to say yes, and they were annoyed that I voted against the abatement, but I did.
Well, $11 billion, so that's a big project. Is that close to any residential areas, or is it kind of out by itself?
It is in a rural area, but there are people that live out in that area, and they'd always considered it kind of their like rural corridor. They had always been in that area that way, and I think they saw it as a major change to their area.
Now, how quickly did they build it, or are they building it?
How quickly are they building it, did you say?
Yes.
I don't know how many shells are up there, but there's a lot already. So I think they're moving pretty quick. I mean, if anybody's following this data center situation, they're trying to build as fast as they can because there's such a demand for the power or for the AI.
And $11 billion, it seems like that would be pretty big data center.
It is. I mean, I've had aerials that I can send it to you later, but they are big. They look ginormous, and you can't believe how much. I mean, they say that they're as big as Walmart supercenters. These buildings, they look bigger to me. But that's what I've heard as a comparison. What's interesting about this data center, and I don't know if this is the same in other areas of the country, but for our first data center, it's in a TIF, And if you know anything about TIFs, instead of like all the tax money going to your if it's in a county, like your county entity, it goes into a specific bordered area. And so the county doesn't get to have all this wealth of all this property tax. It's literally in one section or one segment that they're going to use then around the data center, that they're going to use it for like infrastructure costs and those kind of things. So when people, one of the big arguments for data centers is people say that you need the tax dollars, you need the tax dollars. But in our case, we will, I mean, they will be helpful. We will use them, but they can generally only go into the area around the data center, and anybody that might serve that area. So it does somewhat limit your funds. And also with these areas which are in TIFs, and I don't know how this is in different parts of the country, but the council, who's we're the fiscal body, we don't have control over those funds. They're like an advisory board, basically volunteer board, that basically rubber stamps, because they're not full time. They don't always know the issues through and through, and it's not the best situation.
Yeah, that's really interesting. No, we have TIFs in Irving. We actually have the largest TIF in the state of Texas that was created to pay off the debt for the utilities district and spur development, so it wouldn't be shackled with that debt. It was very successful, and now they're thinking about using it for more development. And were there any concerns of the people in that rural area at the time that Amazon wanted to build this giant data center? And is there any concerns now after it's being built that you've heard about that first data center?
Well, the reason, so we've had 3 different data centers generally aimed at our county. One of those data centers, the second data center, was actually going to be right next to this Amazon data center. So not only did we have this $11 billion data center, they wanted to build like another $12 billion data center or something of that amount right next to it. And so that did lead to a lot of outcry, because we already don't know kind of how this first one's going to work out. It's not done. They're still building. I can't remember the number of data shells they want to put there, but it's a lot. It might be like 30. It's a lot of data shells. So we have no idea what the impact is going to be on that area until it's done. And so we didn't want another one coming in. So I don't know. That doesn't quite answer your question, but because that one has not really showed us what it is, we did say no to another second one there.
Okay, interesting. And what about the third one?
Well, that was the third one. So that was the most recent one. And that was the first. So we had the first Amazon one. Then we had a second data center that aimed kind of for the opposite side of our county. And by that time, people were starting to learn what data centers were. People in economic development offices, at least mine, they're all about economic development. That's all they care about. It's not always about what the citizens care about. They're there for their goal of getting in whatever they can. And so they were trying to ram this project through. The community was very upset. They did it really quick. They didn't really answer community questions. And it was before the council, before those questions were answered. And so I did not vote for that one, because I did not think the community was even respected during that debate. That one did pass, however, and even the representative from the Granger district, which is where it was, voted for it. And he is now probably going to get unelected halfway as a result of that data center vote. So that was the second one. And that one is just now starting to get kind of underway. They're just starting to kind of, do the land grading and those kind of things. And in terms of abatements, I know with the first one I talked about how we passed a big abatement for them. This one we just learned is not going to ask for any abatement. So it's kind of an opposite story of the first data center. So that's interesting, because I think that data centers, because they're having such a hard time convincing communities to accept them into their communities, they are willing to compromise. I mean, I think they always would have been, but we didn't negotiate hard enough. And now they're being more willing to just say, we won't take any abatements. They will to get state abatements, but they won't get local abatements.
Okay, so the first one went through. People didn't know quite what data centers were. The second one went through, but more controversy. So now tell us the story of the third one.
So the third one, so again, it was out where our Amazon project was in this New Carlisle pastoral community. Never have we ever gotten so many emails or just pushback on any project we've ever done. So we knew pretty much the whole town of New Carlisle didn't want a second data center there. And I think that people on the opposite side of our county felt kind of a kinship with them and were also speaking out against it. And we had just people generally all over the county who've just started to kind of get swept up in this anti-data center movement. They're worried about power bills, water, all those things that you hear about all the time. So there was a significant community pushback against it. And it was interesting because the Republicans and Democrats kind of teamed up to push this project regardless of what the people wanted, and started to do kind of a blitz campaign like a week before the vote. The unions and the Republican Party were out joining hands and singing the praises of data centers and saying, really, it's the silent majority that wants these. You're just not hearing from them. Talking about surveys that showed that they were right and we were wrong. But in the end, when we got to the public hearing on this issue, there was about 20 minutes of people that wanted the data centers and hours of testimony from people who didn't want the data center. And our meeting went until 4 a.m. So it was a long, long night. And the final vote was 7-2 against. And the two Democrats that voted for it didn't have any concerns about their seats because one of them's retiring and another one always has an easy election and was just recently reelected. And they were both pro-union, and that's why they voted for the data centers, because a lot of union workers want these data centers for the jobs that they bring into the communities.
Now, they don't bring that many jobs in.
They don't bring that many jobs in in terms of like the Microsoft one that we have coming in. They said about 50 to 100 people per shell. That's what they call these buildings. But it's all those labor jobs to build all of these data centers that have the laborers, the unions wanting them. And they do provide a lot of jobs for them for a time period until the building is done. So
now, what were the top concerns of residents that were expressed in this marathon meeting that were persuasive to you? And then what were the counterpoints, the pro arguments?
I think the big thing was that this New Carlisle area of which I'm talking about, where there was already an Amazon data center and another one I wanted to move in. A lot of the townspeople, they were living around all of this construction, road work, all these people descending. I've heard that about 5,000 people had come into New Carlisle to work on this project. So I think they just wanted a break. That was, this was a big change in their way of life. And just safety wise, the streets are really, really bad with all the traffic and all of the big trucks and all of that. And that's one of the major concerns. And then again, just people are always complaining about water and power and the unknowns with that, the aquifer, or I would never say that right, aquifer, and how that will impact the aquifer. Those were a lot of concerns. But you also heard a lot of bureaucrats, I like to call them, but government people really wanting those tax dollars. In Indiana, we have done a big property tax cut statewide. We did it last year. And so we're expecting less money for county governments. So some of our leadership, I would say, some of our, all of our commissioners, which are kind of our executive branch in the county, all three of them came out in favor of having the data centers. The mayors of our two big cities in South Bend and Mishawaka came out in favor. So you had a lot of people who just wanted the tax dollars, because these do bring in a lot of tax dollars, and they can bring a lot of community benefits in that way. And then again, you had a lot of the other people were the unions who wanted the jobs.
Okay, so it sounds like it's still kind of untested. The big question we have is, when these things are built, is everyone's power bill going to go up?
Well, and it's like you talk to, we all ask these questions, but no one's going to say, yes, your power
Right.
bills are going to go up. Everybody we talk to says we are going to pay for our own power. Pretty much every company will tell you that. We've made, you'll be able to see we're going to pay for all of our own power. However, I think what the question, we've seen other other parts of the country, we've seen people, seeing their bills going up, and they are making a connection to data centers. I don't know if that's been totally proven. But with I don't remember how many billions of dollars that, I mean, they're literally the biggest spending item we're doing in our economy right now are on these data centers. And everything has to be modernized. I'm assuming, it seems to me, with the electrical equipment, all of the lines, the poles. I mean, I have a substation across from my house right now that's getting expanded. And you only think that they're doing this because of all of the data centers. And so whether some of those costs will still be passed on to you, I think most people think they will.
That question was asked and kind of finessed by the representative of the data center at our council meeting.
I like a lot of the aspects of the plan. It's a very high quality data center, and thank you also for addressing the concerns about the water usage and the noise, and those were my concerns as well. Just one final question about the electrical costs. Could you talk a little bit about that? I know there's anecdotal evidence that data centers drive up the cost of electricity to everybody. Do you have any insight into that? And is that the reality, or is it a just a pattern that we see due to a normal rising cost in electricity? I don't know. Could you just address that a little bit?
Yeah, to the best of my ability, without being a full-on expert on it, but the important distinction between this type of project and a hyperscaler, which might deliver 2 million feet at once and place a massive immediate demand on the system. It shouldn't raise other people's rates, but when you put that demand on the system all at once, it can clearly create issues, right? This approach, multi-tenant, co-location, one over multiple phases, we can structure our phases with the rising availability of power to minimize those types of broader impacts to the surrounding properties. And that's the real advantage here. And that should not equate to an increase in rates for anyone else. You also have recent state legislation that is now in effect and is having a big impact on how data centers can acquire power, secure power, and proceed. And you should start seeing the benefits of that state legislation as well.